Her daughter-in-law slapped her hand at her own grandchild's baby shower. Nora Grant, retired ER nurse and widow, her son said nothing, just stared at his plate as the frosting softened under the lights. By morning, the receipts were printed, the furniture tagged, and every favor she'd ever given was legally documented. They'd mistaken her silence for surrender. But Nora had kept everything, even the thank you texts they hoped she'd deleted. And when the storm came, it wouldn't be loud. It would be filed. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The air inside the rented banquet hall shimmered with soft pink light from the paper lanterns hanging above the dessert table. Someone had piped "Welcome Baby Joy" in buttercream across a triple-tier cake, the frosting shining under the cheap chandeliers. Laughter hummed from every corner, the kind that came in bright, polite bursts. Not too loud, not too real. Nora Grant stood near the gift table, a square box in her hands wrapped in silver paper and tied with a cream satin bow. She had picked the wrapping carefully that morning, matching the nursery palette she herself had helped design. The nursery that smelled of new paint and lavender detergent, a space she had quietly funded. Her son, Caleb, was refilling punch bowls near the bar, sleeves rolled to his elbows, trying too hard to look useful. Allison, his wife, her daughter-in-law, floated from guest to guest in a blush dress that caught the light like glass. Her hair was glossy, her smile perfectly calibrated. "Mom, you made it," Caleb said, half smiling. He leaned in to kiss her cheek, eyes flicking toward Allison as if checking for permission. "I wouldn't miss it," Nora said, handing over the box. "Something for the baby." "Stack it right there, by the registry list," Allison called from across the room without turning her head. Nora obeyed, her joints protesting as she bent to set the package down. The table was crowded with pastel ribbons and store-brand diapers dressed up as decor. In the middle stood a crystal vase filled with roses and a little paper stroller centerpiece that listed the baby's due date in gold marker. One of the stroller wheels had come loose, tilting the whole display slightly off balance. Without thinking, Nora reached out to steady it. Just a small adjustment. The way she'd straightened IV poles for 40 years in the ER, the way she fixed anything that leaned wrong. A sharp crack sliced through the polite hum. Allison's manicured hand smacked across Nora's knuckles. Not hard enough to bruise. Just enough to sting. Enough to freeze every conversation in the room. "Don't," Allison said, her smile fixed. "Touch what isn't yours." For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The DJ fumbled with the playlist, restarting a lullaby track that suddenly sounded funereal. Someone near the cake whispered, "Oh my God," too loud. Nora drew her hand back slowly, the skin already reddening. Her pulse jumped in her throat. The paper stroller stood perfectly still now, the gold letters glinting under the chandelier. Baby Joy Grant. She forced her mouth into something like a smile. "Of course," she murmured. "Wouldn't dream of it." Caleb looked down at his plate. A smear of pink frosting spread where his fork hesitated. He didn't move, didn't speak. Nora straightened, the old habit of composure sliding over her like a pressed uniform. "Lovely party," she said to no one in particular. Allison beamed for the crowd, voice bright again. "Isn't it? Everything perfect, just the way I wanted." Laughter returned in slow ripples, uneasy but obedient. Guests pretended to scroll their phones or refill drinks. The tension thinned, but it didn't disappear. It hovered, invisible but felt, like the sterile chill of an operating room after the code team leaves. Nora drifted toward the window, pretending to study the view of the parking lot. Outside, rain clouds were gathering over the Tennessee hills, muting the daylight. Her fingers still tingled. She clenched them once, then let them relax around her purse strap. Mira Dale, her oldest friend, caught her eye from the buffet line. Mira's look was sharp, questioning. "You okay?" Nora gave a single nod. Later, her expression promised. For the next hour, she stayed polite. She smiled when the games began, clapped when Allison opened presents, even laughed when someone handed her a cupcake with a plastic pacifier on top. The sound felt hollow in her own ears. When the last gift was unwrapped and the photographers clustered for the final group shot, Allison posed with one hand resting dramatically over her stomach. "Family picture," someone chirped. Caleb hesitated before motioning for his mother. "Come on, Mom, get in." Nora stepped forward. The crowd parted slightly, not rudely, just with that quiet discomfort people show when they're unsure where to stand. She positioned herself beside her son. Allison shifted a fraction away, enough that the gap would show in the photo. The camera flash popped 3 times. "That's perfect," Allison said. "Thank you, everyone." As the guests began to leave, Nora collected her purse and cardigan. Her fingers brushed the silver-wrapped gift she'd brought. The only thing she'd bought new, not repurposed or reused. Inside was a hand-stitched blanket she'd made during quiet nights, tiny initials embroidered in one corner. JG. She thought about leaving it behind, but something stopped her. Instead, she slipped it under her arm. Outside, the rain had started. A thin, steady drizzle. She walked to her car, the sound of laughter fading behind her. She placed the gift on the passenger seat and sat for a long moment, watching droplets gather on the windshield. Her hand still burned faintly. Then, slowly, she smiled, not bitterly, but with the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. The windshield wipers clicked once. "Don't touch what isn't yours," she whispered to herself. And then she turned the key. By the time Nora pulled into her driveway, the drizzle had hardened into a downpour that drummed across her windshield like an old metronome. The porch light flickered, cutting through the gray, and for the first time in years, she left her purse in the car. She went straight inside, peeled off her damp cardigan, and stood for a long moment in the quiet of her small living room, where everything had its place, because she'd put it there. Her hand still tingled where Allison's ring had grazed her skin. The sting had faded, but not the meaning. She flexed her fingers once, then walked toward the spare bedroom she used as her home office. The blinds were half closed, the light soft and cool. Nora opened the top drawer of her desk. Inside, a neat stack of envelopes, statements, and folders lay arranged by date. She pulled them out one by one. A nurse's precision never left her, and spread them across the desk. Crib. $1,299 from Trina's Baby Boutique. Glider. $849. Same store. Changing table. $624. Partial payment from her account. Balance on Caleb's. Rent deposit. $2,000 even. Wired from her savings when the couple needed a little help getting started. Every line item was dated. Every transaction backed by screenshots and photos. She'd kept them all, partly because she'd always been careful, partly because she'd known, deep down, that gratitude from Allison would always come with an expiration date. Thunder rolled outside. Nora switched on her desk lamp, its amber glow slicing through the gloom. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through old texts until she found the one from 6 months ago. "Allison. We couldn't have done this without you. The nursery looks perfect. Thank you again, Nora." Nora read it twice, then printed a screenshot. Her printer whirred to life, spitting out evidence of the thank you that Allison would soon pretend never existed. The doorbell rang once. Mira Dale never texted before showing up. Nora opened the door to find her friend shaking the rain off a plaid umbrella, a takeout coffee in each hand. "You looked like someone who needed caffeine and counsel," Mira said, stepping inside. "I need a reset," Nora murmured. Mira eyed the desk, then the spread of receipts. "You're building a case, aren't you?" Nora took a sip of coffee, eyes steady. I'm building clarity. Mira set her cup down, rolling up the sleeves of her denim jacket. You want to burn her down or just take back your walls? Nora met her gaze. Just reclaim what I bought, that's all. The clock ticked between them, steady as a heartbeat. Mira nodded once. Then we'll do this clean. Start with what's provable. You have the receipts, and I know the law. Nora gave a small smile, gratitude and steel braided together. I knew you'd say that. Mira gathered her umbrella, pausing at the door. You sure you're ready to start? I already started, Nora said. When Mira left, the rain had softened again, a steady whisper against the glass. Nora returned to the desk and picked up her phone. The contact she searched for appeared quickly. Trina Powell, Baby Boutique. She hadn't spoken to her in months, but Trina had always remembered details. Who bought what, when, and why. The line rang twice before a brisk southern voice answered. Trina's Boutique, this is Trina. Trina, it's Nora Grant. Well, I'll be. How's my favorite practical grandma? Nora exhaled, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. Slightly less practical than usual. What can I do for you? I have a question about your return policy, specifically on nursery furniture. Trina's tone shifted, curious but cautious. Depends on the situation, hun. You having a problem? Nora leaned back in her chair, watching rain streak down the window. Let's just say something I bought doesn't belong where it ended up. A pause, then a quiet hum of understanding. Still have that return clause on the invoice? I do. For you? Trina said, her voice sharpening with warmth and intent. I'll reset the clock. Nora felt something unclench in her chest. Not relief exactly, but alignment. Thank you, Trina. You don't owe me thanks. You paid your share. Sometimes that's all the world needs to see. When the call ended, Nora printed the receipts again. One clean copy for records, one for what came next. She gathered the pages into a crisp stack, slid them into a binder, and set it on the edge of her desk. Her reflection in the dark window looked older than she felt, but steadier than she'd been in years. Outside, lightning cracked over the ridge, brief and blinding. Nora reached for her pen and wrote 3 words on the first page of her binder in neat block letters. Not yours anymore. She closed the binder and turned off the lamp, leaving the room in shadow, calm, deliberate, and waiting. Saturday dawned gray and hushed, the kind of Tennessee morning where even the birds sounded unsure. Nora parked half a block from Caleb and Allison's starter home, the binder on the passenger seat and her spare key glinting under it. The street was still, save for a lone sprinkler ticking across a neighbor's yard. She waited a full minute before stepping out. Not to gather courage, she already had that, but to make sure no one saw her. The last thing she wanted was to give Allison another story to twist. The house looked smaller than she remembered. It always did when kindness had been withdrawn. The porch light was off, the curtains drawn tight. She climbed the steps, the key cold in her hand. The lock clicked open smoothly. Caleb had never changed it. Inside, the air was stale, faintly sweet with baby lotion and plastic wrap. Half-packed boxes sat near the front door, signs that Allison's nesting instinct had kicked into overdrive. Nora's throat tightened at the faint scent of fresh paint. Morning mist, the color she had helped choose. She moved quietly, her nurse's instinct guiding her. Step lightly, disturb nothing she didn't need to. The nursery door was ajar. She pushed it open and stood for a long moment, taking in what she'd once imagined would be her favorite room. Pale yellow curtains, cloud print wallpaper, and the furniture she'd ordered one piece at a time, checking each tracking number as if the packages carried her own blood. Now it just looked like a showroom. Beautiful, but cold. Nora set her tote bag down and unzipped it, pulling out a camera, masking tape, and a roll of brown tags. Methodical as surgery prep. She started with the glider. Her hands knew the feel of the armrests, the subtle squeak of the right hinge. She crouched, took a photo, and looped a tag around one leg. In steady, blocky print. Paid by NG. Removed by NG. Next, the white bassinet. She snapped another photo, labeled it the same. The bookshelf followed. The small dresser after that. Every item lifted or slid with care. Documented from every angle, timestamp glowing in the corner of the digital frame. By the time she reached the changing table, she was sweating lightly. It wasn't the work, it was the finality. Halfway through, she paused and looked around. Without the furniture, the room's echo changed. The warmth that had filled it, the quiet expectation of a grandchild's arrival, had drained away. The painted clouds looked almost embarrassed, floating over empty space. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Mom, can we talk?" Allie's upset. She stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering, then slid the phone face down on the dresser. No reply. Not yet. By noon, the movers arrived. 2 polite young men Trina had arranged. They worked efficiently, not asking questions. Nora guided them, pointing to each tagged item. "This one, and that bookshelf. Leave the curtains and wall art," she said. "Just these." "Yes, ma'am," one of them answered. When they carried the last piece down the hall, Nora lingered by the doorway, letting her gaze trace every remaining detail: the pastel rug, the empty corners, the way light filtered through the blinds in clean stripes. It no longer looked like a nursery. It looked like a room waiting for honesty. She reached into her tote one last time and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on thick cream stationery, the same kind Allison used for thank you cards. Nora set it on the windowsill, weighed down with a pacifier she'd found on the dresser. "Don't touch what isn't yours." Her handwriting was neat, unhurried. The same calm she'd used to chart vitals for decades, to tell families their loved ones would be all right, or not. She took one final photo of the room from the doorway, the note visible, the emptiness sharp and clean. When she stepped outside, the sky had cleared, a slice of blue breaking through. The movers were strapping down the last dresser onto the truck bed. Nora climbed into her car, adjusted the mirror, and watched the house through the windshield. Her phone buzzed again. This time, 3 messages in a row. Caleb. "Mom, where are you?" Caleb. "Did you take the stuff?" Allison. "You are out of your mind." Nora didn't open them. She just turned on the ignition, the hum of the engine steady and quiet, matching her heartbeat. In the rearview mirror, the house receded, one window curtain fluttering as if watching her leave. She whispered to herself, "Now let's see who notices what's missing first." And she drove away, sunlight flashing across her windshield like a curtain lifting on the next act. The next morning, Nora woke to the phone vibrating on her nightstand. The digital clock glowed 6:47 a.m. She let it buzz until the sound dissolved into silence, then flipped it over. 7 missed calls, all from Caleb. She stared at the screen until it dimmed, the light fading like a pulse slowing down. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint whine of wind through the siding. On the table beside her bed, the binder sat closed, its cover smooth beneath a folded note from Mira. "Hold your line." Nora swung her legs out of bed and padded to the kitchen, the linoleum cool under her bare feet. She poured herself coffee, black and strong, and watched rain bead on the window above the sink. Tennessee weather never stayed still. It shifted like moods, like family loyalty. The phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail. Caleb's voice, tight, anxious, trying to stay polite. "Mom, look, Allie's really upset. She said you came by the house and, well, you took things. Can you just call me back? Please?" Nora hit delete before it could finish. Another voicemail followed minutes later. His tone cracked this time. "Mom, what are you doing? This isn't you." She didn't answer that either. Because he was wrong. This was exactly her. The same steady woman who had once made split-second calls in an ER, who had learned that silence, used correctly, could be its own kind of power. By 8, her phone chimed again. This time a text. "Allison, you are insane. We could have talked like adults. Now you've embarrassed us both." Nora's thumb hovered over the screen. She read the message twice. Then she tapped block contact. The quiet that followed felt like exhaling after holding her breath for months. She carried her coffee to the dining table and opened her binder. Page after page of receipts, photos, and notes. Organized, precise, unshakable. On the last page, she had written her own total the night before. 8,927,42. A figure that wasn't about money. It was about acknowledgement. Her phone rang again, but this time, the name on the screen made her smile. "Morning, Trina," she said, answering. "Morning yourself. I went over the invoices from the boutique. Everything lines up clean. You want me to send my guys for the rest of the pieces today?" Nora glanced at the clock. "They'll be home around 3. Let's make it 10. "Done. I'll mark it as customer reclamation. Paper trails in your name." "Appreciate that." "You deserve it. Folks forget. Ownership leaves a footprint." After hanging up, Nora scribbled a reminder on a yellow post-it. Final pickup, 10 Cas a.m. She pressed it onto the edge of the binder like a surgeon tagging an incision site. By 9:30, the movers arrived again. They greeted her like an old colleague, respectful, wordless. Within an hour, the rest of her belongings, the glider cushions, the framed nursery art she'd paid to have custom printed, were neatly stacked in her garage. The rain had tapered off into mist, and sunlight slanted through the open door, making the pale wood gleam. "Where you want these, Ms. Grant?" one of the men asked. "Against the back wall, please. I'll decide later." He nodded, wiped his hands on his jeans, and closed the truck door behind him. When they left, the garage felt oddly sacred, a museum of intention. Every reclaimed piece was proof that generosity didn't mean surrender. That afternoon, Mira arrived, her heels clicking purposefully against the driveway. She carried a thin manila folder and a knowing look. "Draft's ready," she said, stepping inside. Nora motioned to the dining table where the binder waited. "Let's have a look." Mira laid out the papers, crisp, typed, stamped with the date. At the top, in bold, "Invoice for reimbursement, property and assets purchased by Nora Grant." Below it, a list of every item with serial numbers, store receipts, and the total printed clean and certain, 8,927.42. Mira tapped the bottom line. "Certified mail gets more attention than phone calls. We'll send 2 copies, one to her, one to Caleb. I'll make sure they both have to sign for it." Nora picked up the envelope, feeling its weight. It wasn't heavy, just dense with meaning. "Let's do it." They drove to the post office together, the silence between them companionable. At the counter, the clerk asked, "Value of contents?" $8,927.42, Nora said evenly. The clerk's eyebrows rose. "Expensive paperwork?" Nora smiled. "Priceless, actually." Outside, she slipped on her sunglasses as the autumn light cut through the thinning clouds. Mira gave her a sidelong glance. "You know she's going to come unglued when that letter lands." "I'm counting on it," Nora said. They stood by Nora's car for a moment, the breeze tugging at their hair. Mira squeezed her shoulder. "You did the right thing." "I know," Nora said, "but right doesn't always feel gentle." As she drove home, the radio played low, an old blues tune about debts and dues. She parked in front of her house, turned off the ignition, and looked at the silver mailbox standing at the end of her driveway. Inside, her revenge was already on its way. Back in the house, she poured herself another cup of coffee and watched a pair of robins tug at worms in the damp lawn. Her phone sat silent on the counter, screen black. She smiled faintly, then said aloud, to the empty room, to the morning air that smelled faintly of rain and reckoning. Let's see if they sign for it. By the time the certified letters landed in Allison and Caleb's mailbox, the fall air in Chattanooga had turned sharp enough to bite. Leaves skittered across Nora's porch, dry and frantic. She sat at her kitchen table that Monday morning, a second cup of coffee cooling beside her. The radio whispering low country blues through the stillness. Mira arrived 5 minutes early, as always, carrying her worn leather briefcase and the kind of energy that meant business. "You've been watching the mailbox like it's going to explode," she said, hanging her coat on the chair. "Feels like it might," Nora replied. Mira set down a folder thick with papers and a portable scanner. "Then let's make sure you're holding the detonator." Nora half smiled, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mira opened the folder, spreading documents across the table like a dealer laying down cards. Receipts, screenshots, emails, printouts, evidence built from 6 months of quiet generosity. "You've got a clean trail here," she said, flipping through them with quick, practiced fingers. "Now, before we do anything formal, you need to understand the line we're walking. Gift versus conditional loan." Nora folded her hands, palms flat on the table. "Meaning?" Mira tapped one of the printouts. "A gift is something you give without expecting anything in return. A conditional loan, though, can be argued as payment with expectations, explicit or implied. The key here is intent, and documentation that supports that intent." "Intent," Nora repeated. "Mine was to help them build a home, not to be erased from it." "Exactly." Mira slid a few printed text messages across the table. "And these help. Look here, this one, 2 weeks before the shower." Nora leaned closer. It was a text from Allison. "We couldn't have done this without you. The nursery looks perfect. Thank you again, Nora." Below it, another from Caleb. "You've done too much already. We'll pay you back once things settle down." Mira tapped the second message. "That right there? That's acknowledgement. That's promise of repayment. It doesn't need to say loan to function like one. Courts see through semantics when the behavior tells the truth." Nora's lips tightened. A slow, satisfied motion. "So it wasn't a gift." Mira leaned back, arms folded. "No, this was no gift. This was a quiet investment in their start. And they treated it like they were entitled to your capital." The word investment lingered in the air like a spark catching. Nora repeated it softly. "Investment." Mira nodded once. "You built their beginning." She slapped your hand for touching the structure you funded. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the wind shifted, knocking a hanging fern against the porch rail. Nora's mind was already moving ahead. Not angry, just calculating, like the nurse she'd once been, running through a checklist before a procedure. "What happens next?" she asked. Mira opened her laptop and began typing, her fingers a blur. "We file a claim in Hamilton County Small Claims Court. We're not after vengeance, we're after correction. Demand for either return of property or repayment of cost." Nora sipped her coffee, the bitter edge grounding her. "And how do we prove it's worth their attention?" Mira smiled thinly. "We don't prove it, we show it. Clean paper trail, professional formatting, registered counsel listed. Most people crumble before the hearing date." As Mira spoke, Nora studied her own hands. The same ones Allison had slapped days ago. They looked steady now. Sure, the tremor of hesitation finally gone. "Caleb won't stand up for me," she said quietly. "Then don't make him." Mira replied. Make him watch. The printer clicked and spat out the first page of the filing. Hamilton County Small Claims Court Plaintiff, Nora E. Grant. Defendant, Allison M. Grant. The black ink gleamed wetly in the lamplight. Mira gathered the stack, slid it into a manila envelope, and pushed it toward Nora. Sign here, here, and initial here. Nora took the pen. Her signature was steady, her initials crisp. She looked up when she was done. What's the filing fee? $74. Nora reached into her wallet and set the cash on the table. Paid in full. Mira tucked the papers back into her briefcase, her tone softening. You're sure about this? Once it's filed, there's no walking it back. Nora's expression didn't waver. She said it wasn't mine. Let's test that in court. For the first time that morning, Mira smiled, not politely, but with quiet pride. That's the woman I remember from the hospital fundraiser who wouldn't let a board member talk over her. I'm done being polite, Nora said. Polite doesn't get you back what you earned. By noon, the paperwork was filed electronically. Mira sent a confirmation ping from her phone, and they both sat back in silence, listening to the rain starting again outside. Finally, Nora rose and crossed to the window. Down the street, a delivery truck pulled into a neighbor's driveway. The sight of it, routine, ordinary, hit her with a strange calm. Mira closed her briefcase. It'll take 48 hours for the court to process. After that, they'll be served. Nora turned from the window, her voice measured, resolute. Then we wait. Mira gave a single nod, buttoned her coat, and headed for the door. You know what they say, Nora. The quietest storms are the ones already moving. Nora watched her friend leave, the sound of rain swallowing the click of heels. She turned off the kitchen light and sat back down at the table. The filing receipt glowing faintly on her phone screen. Outside, thunder rumbled, low, deliberate. Nora smiled to herself, whispering into the hum of the storm. Let's see whose name shakes first. The first attempt at delivery landed on a Thursday morning, crisp, bright, and deceptively calm. Nora was in her garden when the text came from Mira. Mira. Courier confirms. Notice left on their door. Refused signature. Nora read it twice, thumb hovering above the screen, the autumn air sharp against her face. Refused. Of course she did. Allison never faced anything head-on. She let others soften her consequences. She wiped her hands on her jeans, stared at the tomato vines she'd let go dry, and whispered, Denial fits her. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon from the candle she'd lit that morning, her own small ritual of calm before each move. She poured herself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where she and Mira had built their quiet little legal fire. 10 minutes later, her phone rang. Caleb. Nora sighed, sipped once, and answered. Hello, Caleb? His voice was low, threaded with tension. Mom, can we talk? Please. She didn't reply immediately. She could hear the wind through his end of the line, probably pacing their back porch, torn between two loyalties he'd never learned to balance. Allie's upset, he said finally. The summons came. She thinks you're trying to humiliate her. Nora let the silence stretch until he filled it with nervous breathing. Then calmly, she humiliated herself. He groaned. Mom, come on. This doesn't have to be a war. You can't just sue us. I didn't sue you, she said evenly. I sued her. That's semantics. It's accountability, Nora countered. You already had your chance to speak up, Caleb. You said nothing when she slapped my hand in front of a room full of people. You watched. There was a pause, a long one, then a quiet, broken, I didn't know what to do. That's becoming a pattern, she said, voice flat but not cruel. You still don't. He tried again, softer this time. Can't we just talk this out? You, me, Allie. No. Mom. I said no. She ended the call and placed the phone face down beside her mug. The house returned to silence, save for the faint tick of the wall clock. An hour later, a text from Mira. Mira. She refused service. Officially marked non-deliverable. I'll have it resent via process server. Different method. She'll sign it whether she likes it or not. Nora. Do it. Mira's response came seconds later. Already in motion. By evening, the storm had shifted online. Nora didn't use Facebook much anymore, but her friend Cynthia did. And Cynthia sent screenshots. Posts from Allison's circle bloomed like weeds. Can you believe some people think baby shower gifts come with receipts? Apparently, Grandma Grant went rogue. She took the crib. Who even does that? Nora scrolled through them, expression unreadable. She didn't comment, didn't defend. Let them talk, let them speculate. Truth didn't need to shout. It only needed to last longer than rumor. But Trina, always sharp, always loyal, posted something that made Nora's lips curve upward. A photo of her boutique's front counter, a register receipt half visible. Caption: Some purchases come with proof, even for diapers. Karsha receipts matter. Within an hour, the post had 20 shares and 100 comments. Half the town knew exactly who it was about. The phone buzzed again. This time, a call from Mira. They've escalated online, she said dryly. Allison's trying to crowdsource sympathy. I'm not on social media, Nora said. I don't need to be. Good, because we've got confirmation from the process server. He'll hand-deliver tomorrow morning. Certified affidavit. No way to dodge this one. Perfect. Nora's voice carried a calm that Mira recognized instantly, the same calm she'd used when walking into the ER on double shifts. You holding up? Mira asked. I'm steady. Mira chuckled. You sound almost satisfied. Not yet, Nora said, but close. After they hung up, Nora stood by the window. The streetlights flickered on one by one, painting the neighborhood in amber glow. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then fell silent. Her reflection in the glass looked different tonight. Not softer, but truer. The phone vibrated again. Another voicemail from Caleb. She didn't listen. Not this time. She pressed delete and turned away. On the counter, the binder still lay open, one-page clip to mark the current total, 8,927.42. Nora slid her finger along the column of numbers, then closed it gently. Tomorrow, Allison would sign for her own reckoning. She poured the last of her coffee into the sink, rinsed the mug, and whispered to the empty kitchen. Run from the paper all you want, sweetheart. It still finds you. Outside, thunder rolled again. Quieter this time, but closer. The envelope arrived 2 mornings later, dropped neatly between a grocery flyer and an electric bill. Nora spotted the county seal before she even bent to pick it up. The sight of it sent a small electric thrill through her chest. Not victory, not yet, but validation. Inside, the letter was brief and businesslike. Hearing date: October 3rd, 9 a.m., 3 weeks before Allison's due date. Nora smiled faintly. Poetic, she murmured. The kitchen clock ticked behind her, each second a metronome for her calm. She placed the letter in her binder beneath a tab labeled Court Correspondence and ran her fingers over the organized pages. Invoices, screenshots, return forms, printed text chains. Every line of ink was a boundary redrawn. Mira arrived that afternoon, carrying her laptop and a paper bag of pastries. You've been nesting, she said, eyeing the binder, the sticky notes, the fresh coffee pot. Preparation, Nora corrected, flipping to the summary page. We're almost done. Mira sat down, setting her phone to record. Let's rehearse. You'll want to sound concise in front of the judge. No emotion, no anecdotes, just documentation. Nora adjusted her glasses. I've been concise my whole life. Mira's smile held pride and worry. You ready for them to cry? Nora didn't flinch. She slapped my hand, Mira. I'm done handling them gently. The words hung in the air like a promise. Mira nodded once, approving. They worked through the afternoon, trimming unnecessary lines, organizing the exhibit order. By the time the sun dipped low behind the trees, the binder looked less like paperwork and more like a verdict waiting to be spoken aloud. As Mira packed up, she hesitated. This will shake your son, she said quietly. You know that, right? He's already shaking, Nora said. He just hasn't realized it's from standing between two truths. Mira touched her arm. You don't have to teach him the hard way. Nora gave a small, weary smile. I'm not teaching him. Life is. When the door closed behind her friend, the house settled into its familiar stillness. Nora poured herself a small glass of whiskey, not much, just enough for warmth, and took it out to the back porch. The evening smelled like rain on wood, like endings that had decided not to wait. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. Caleb, Mom, please, let's stop this before it goes further. She stared at the message, thumb hovering. Her pulse stayed steady, but something in her chest pressed down. A memory of him as a boy, running across this same yard, barefoot and laughing. She could almost hear his voice from 30 years ago. Mom, look what I found. Now all she saw was the man who'd stood silent while his wife slapped his mother's hand. Nora typed one word and sent it. No. Seconds later, the typing bubbles appeared. Caleb, you're hurting the family. Nora. Family doesn't slap hands or hide receipts. He didn't reply after that. The porch light flickered as the wind shifted. Nora finished her drink, set the glass down, and listened to the crickets pulse against the dark. She wasn't proud of this quiet satisfaction, but it was honest. And she'd learned that honesty, while not always kind, was clean. Inside, her phone buzzed again. This time, a number she didn't recognize. Katie. Grandma. I saw the video. Mom's wrong. Nora blinked, surprised. Katie was Allison's teenage niece, old enough to understand, young enough to still believe in fairness. Nora. You okay, sweetheart? Katie. Yeah. Just wanted to say I know you didn't do anything bad. People talk, but I know what I saw. Nora's throat tightened, unexpected warmth rising in her chest. She typed back. Thank you for seeing the truth, Katie. A moment later, Katie. If I were you, I'd circle the date in red. Nora smiled, slow and deep. She went back to the kitchen, pulled a red pen from the drawer, and opened her wall calendar. The square for October 3rd waited like a blank invitation. She drew a single bold circle around it, unhurried, deliberate, then set the pen down beside it. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, shaking the window panes. Nora looked toward the sound, calm as ever. The countdown starts now. By the following week, the story had leaked beyond social media. In Chattanooga, that didn't take much. A few whispers in the grocery line, a single coffee shop conversation, and suddenly the whole town had a version of the truth. Nora didn't feed it. She didn't post, didn't text, didn't explain. She simply moved through her days with the same quiet rhythm as always. Grocery shopping early, walking her block before dusk, answering only calls from Mira or Trina. The silence worked like wind on embers, invisible, but spreading. It started with Cynthia. Cynthia ran the florist shop where Allison had ordered her baby shower arrangements. Lilies and pale roses, the ones Nora had discreetly paid for months ago. She stopped by Nora's house one afternoon with a wrapped bouquet of sunflowers and a tilt to her head that said she already knew more than she was saying. Thought you could use some color in this gray week, Cynthia said, setting the bouquet on the porch railing. Nora smiled. You didn't have to do that. Cynthia smirked. I know, but folks around here don't like ungrateful girls. Word gets around fast when somebody bites the hand that bought their bassinet. Nora didn't answer. She didn't have to. That evening, Cynthia posted a single photo, a bouquet against Nora's white porch rail, sunlight flaring through the petals. Caption: Gratitude costs nothing. Some people still remember that. By morning, it had 50 comments and 300 likes. From there, the ripple widened. Allison's church group, the women who'd once fawned over her registry and mimosa bars, began withdrawing like the tide. Invitations stopped arriving. Her mommy brunch group chat went quiet. One by one, they unfollowed, untagged, disconnected. Trina called Nora 2 days later, voice warm but edged with amusement. You'll appreciate this one. The boutique got a call from her this morning. Wanted to know why she couldn't access her VIP registry perks anymore. And? I told her we reserve that program for paying members in good standing, which she isn't. You should have heard the silence on the other end. It was art. Nora chuckled, soft and low. You didn't have to do that, Trina. Oh, I did. Receipts matter, remember? That night, Nora's friend group, the same women she'd played bridge with for years, gathered at her house under the guise of checking in. Mira came too, carrying her usual arsenal of legal calm and sarcasm. The group settled around Nora's dining table, coffee cups and lemon bars between them, the air heavy with the kind of loyalty that doesn't need to be declared. She's been telling people you took advantage of them, one friend said, that you're bitter about getting old. Nora's lips barely moved. And yet I'm not the one scrambling to find new friends. Mira lifted her cup to strategic silence. Laughter broke around the table, soft but genuine, the kind that belonged to women who'd seen enough of life to know when to let fools hang themselves. After they left, Nora sat alone in the quiet kitchen. The flowers Cynthia had brought now stood in a vase by the window, their yellow heads turned toward the last bit of evening sun. She thought of how small towns worked, not through shouting, but through remembering. People here noticed who helped and who hurt, who said thank you and who didn't. Her phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Trina. Trina, for what it's worth, your file is a thing of beauty. Everything cataloged. No court can shake it. Trina, second message. Also, 20% off any grandbaby gear, permanently. Consider it a loyalty discount. Nora smiled, then set the phone down. The house was still again, but the stillness no longer felt like loneliness. It felt earned. She walked through the living room, past the binder that now lived on her coffee table, and paused by the calendar still hanging open to October. The red circle gleamed under the lamplight. Outside, the crickets had returned, their hum steady and calm. Inside, the air smelled faintly of sunflowers and ink, the scent of things already decided. She traced her finger around that red circle again and whispered, "Almost time." And somewhere across town, in a house Nora had once helped pay for, Allison's phone pinged with another text. This one from one of her own friends. "I'm sorry, but we're sitting the shower out. People are talking." The first crack in Allison's perfect world had begun to show. The morning of the hearing dawned glass clear, sky like polished steel, sunlight sharp and cold. Nora dressed with precision, navy slacks, pressed blouse, her old pearl earrings. No theatrics, just composure. She'd worn calmer faces to grimmer rooms. Mira picked her up at 8 on the dot, car spotless, coffee waiting in the cup holder. "You ready?" Nora fastened her seatbelt. "I've been ready since the shower." Mira smiled faintly, checking her watch. "Court opens in 20. Let's see if your daughter-in-law shows up with an entourage." "She'll bring an audience," Nora said, voice dry. But not a defense. Hamilton County Small Claims Court sat tucked between a bail bonds office and a row of tired law firms. The waiting area smelled faintly of floor wax and paper. Nora took a seat beside Mira, binder balanced on her lap. Across the aisle, Allison sat rigid in a pale blazer that strained across her belly, flanked by Caleb, who looked as though he'd forgotten how to breathe. Allison didn't meet Nora's eyes. She just whispered something to Caleb and crossed her arms. When the clerk called Grant versus Grant, the room hushed with that peculiar mix of boredom and curiosity reserved for other people's drama. They filed into the small courtroom. Fluorescent light, scuffed benches, a flag drooping behind the judge's bench. The judge herself was a woman in her 50s, hair tight in a bun, eyes sharp behind half-moon glasses. She looked like someone who'd seen every version of petty war imaginable. "Let's keep this brief," the judge said. "I've reviewed the filings." Mira stood, calm and precise. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Nora Grant, is seeking restitution for household and nursery items she purchased in good faith for her son and daughter-in-law, under what she reasonably believed to be an agreement of shared ownership." Allison's lawyer, a young man who looked like he'd borrowed confidence from a manual, rose to speak. "Your Honor, Mrs. Allison Grant asserts that these were gifts, given freely, and that Mrs. Nora Grant's subsequent removal of said property constitutes theft and emotional distress." "Your Honor," Mira cut in smoothly, "we'd like to introduce Exhibit A." She slid a packet of photos onto the table. Nora recognized them instantly, her tags on each item, her handwriting clean and certain. Paid by NG, removed by NG. The judge flipped through them, expression unreadable. "And these were taken when?" "The day before the shower," Mira said. "Time-stamped, verified. Each item was purchased with my client's personal funds, supported by these receipts." She laid down Exhibit B, the thick printouts of invoices, Trina's boutique receipts, and bank statements. Nora watched the young lawyer's jaw tighten as he flipped through them. His confidence was already slipping, the way Allison's social circle had. The judge shifted her gaze to Allison. "Do you contest any of these receipts?" Allison hesitated. "They were gifts." She said she wanted to help. "Do you have written proof of that intent?" Silence. Mira folded her arms. "Your Honor, if I may, we also have text messages acknowledging repayment intent." She handed over screenshots. The judge read one aloud. "You've done too much already. We'll pay you back once things settle down." She looked up. "That's from your husband, Mrs. Grant?" Caleb cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am." "And at any point did your mother say she didn't expect repayment?" He glanced at Allison, then down at his hands. No, ma'am." The young lawyer interjected weakly. "It's a misunderstanding between family members. Surely this can—" "Mr. Wilkes," the judge said sharply, "your client also filed a countersuit for emotional distress, claiming harassment via financial retaliation. Do you have documentation of that claim?" Wilkes glanced at Allison. "We're compiling it." "Compiling," the judge repeated, unimpressed. "We're not here to compile. We're here to decide." She shuffled through the files again, her voice even. "This case is clean. Documentation is consistent. Testimony corroborates intent. The countersuit is dismissed for lack of merit." Allison's jaw slackened. "Wait. What?" The judge ignored her. "As for Mrs. Nora Grant's filing, the defendant is hereby ordered to return all remaining disputed items within 7 days or pay the total reimbursement value of $8,927.42, court fees included." The gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. For a moment no one moved. The air seemed to flatten, sound collapsing under the weight of the decision. Then Mira began gathering the files, movements efficient and unbothered. Nora rose quietly beside her. Across the aisle, Allison whispered furiously to Caleb, her face flushing red. He stared at the table, shoulders hunched. He looked small in his suit, smaller than she remembered. As they turned to leave, Nora heard the faint scrape of a chair. Caleb's voice followed her, soft and breaking. "Mom." She didn't stop. In the hallway, Mira exhaled slowly, a smile ghosting across her lips. "And that, my friend, is what happens when you bring truth to a paper fight." Nora looked toward the exit doors, sunlight cutting through the glass like a blade. "She said it wasn't mine," she murmured. "Now a judge says otherwise." Mira patted her shoulder. "Congratulations, you just won back more than furniture." Outside, the courthouse steps gleamed in the noon light. Reporters weren't waiting. This wasn't that kind of story. But the wind felt different. As they walked to the car, Nora's phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. "Caleb, please stop this. She's crying. She's embarrassed." Nora stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then she locked the phone and slid it into her purse. "She'll live," she said softly. "So will I." The two women climbed into the car. Mira started the engine, but Nora looked back toward the courthouse doors one last time. Inside, Allison was probably still arguing, still certain the world owed her softness. But outside, out here, the air finally felt her own. Nora smiled faintly. Phase 1 concluded. The judgment came through the following Monday, crisp and formal on Hamilton County letterhead. Mira read it over coffee at Nora's table, pen tapping softly against the margin. $8,927.42, she said. Plus 74 in filing fees, plus service costs. Call it an even 9,000. Nora nodded, her hands folded neatly around her mug. "Expensive lesson." "Cheap one," Mira corrected, considering the tuition most people pay for humility. They both smiled. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the yard damp and shining. Nora felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. Not giddy, not triumphant, just restored. Mira slid a final document across the table. "If she doesn't pay voluntarily, we garnish her refund. IRS cooperation is slow, but solid. I can file the lien." "Do it," Nora said. She wanted to make this formal. Let's keep it formal. Mira gathered her briefcase, adjusted her glasses. "You're a rare woman, Nora Grant." "I'm just tired of being quiet." Before noon, Allison texted. "Allison, can we please talk? I can't come up with that money all at once." "Allison, please, I'll pay it off in installments. I just need time." Nora stared at the words, the desperate tone buried under the politeness. For once, Allison's grammar was immaculate. Fear did that to people. She replied simply, "Nora, Mira handles payment arrangements. Contact her office." The dots pulsed, stopped, returned. "Allison, you're really doing this? To family?" "Nora, to an adult who made choices." The screen stayed blank after that. That afternoon, Mira called to confirm. "She wants a payment plan," she said, voice flat with professionalism. "I told her we'd accept, via wage garnishment or tax refund intercept, whichever hits first." "Perfect," Nora said. "She tried to argue it was cruel," Mira added. "I told her cruelty would have been letting her think there were no consequences." "Thank you, Mira." "You don't owe me thanks," her friend said softly. "You owe yourself peace." By Wednesday, the judgment paperwork had gone public record. Trina called that night, the sound of store inventory scanners beeping faintly behind her. "Well, it's official," she said. "Your daughter-in-law tried to open a new registry account this morning. System flagged her name as restricted." Nora raised an eyebrow, though Trina couldn't see it. "You're kidding." "Wish I was. My associate came to me wide-eyed. I told her, "Honey, we stand by our payers." Nora laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that didn't sting. "I'll send flowers. Make it sunflowers. They look good on your porch." After hanging up, Nora walked to her window and looked out at the same porch where Cynthia's bouquet still stood. The petals were starting to fade now, curling gently at the edges, but their color hadn't dulled. That evening, her doorbell rang. She opened it expecting a delivery, but it was Caleb, standing under the porch light with his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He looked older, tired, his usual smooth charm worn down to apology. "Hey, Mom." "Caleb." He hesitated, then held out an envelope. "Her lawyer said to deliver this. First payment." Nora took it but didn't open it. "Thank you." He nodded, shifting from foot to foot. "She's not doing great. She says people look at her differently now." Nora leaned against the doorframe. "They're looking at her accurately, that's all." He flinched slightly. "I know she was wrong. I should have said something, You didn't," Nora said gently, not to wound, but to end the sentence for him. "You didn't, Caleb." He exhaled, his voice fraying. "I don't know how to fix this." "You don't," she said. "You just stop repeating it." They stood in silence for a long moment. The porch light hummed. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and stopped. Finally, Nora set the envelope on the side table by the door. "Tell her she has my mailing address for the next payment, and tell her I wish her health." Caleb's eyes lifted, confused. "Health?" "She'll need it," Nora said softly, "to carry the weight of learning." He nodded once, unsure, then stepped back into the drizzle. Nora watched him leave until his car disappeared around the corner. Then she locked the door, turned off the porch light, and walked back to the kitchen. The envelope sat beside her binder. She opened it carefully. Inside, a cashier's check for $500 and a handwritten note in Allison's looping script. "I'll pay it all back." "You win." Nora stared at the words for a long time before folding the note in half and slipping it into the back pocket of her binder, behind the receipts, behind the photos, behind the record of everything she'd built and reclaimed. "Winning wasn't the point," she murmured. But still, she smiled. The rain deepened outside, steady and soft, washing over her windows like applause. The courthouse Dropbox was nearly empty that morning. Just a few manila envelopes stacked against the metal wall, the sound of one more sliding in breaking the hush of the hallway. Nora stood for a moment, fingertips resting against the cool steel, before she turned and walked away. Her part was done. The filings were complete, the receipts signed, the payments scheduled. The story was now inked into county record, neat and permanent, the way she liked things to be. Outside, the air smelled like wet asphalt and honeysuckle. She pulled her cardigan tighter and headed home. The garage waited like a museum of what had once been stolen and then restored, each piece of nursery furniture gleaming under the small fluorescent light. The bassinet, the dresser, the little white bookshelf that had held picture books she'd chosen herself. Nora stepped inside, the cement floor cool beneath her flats, and ran a hand across the smooth curve of the glider's armrest. She'd sanded out a scuff last week, taken her time with it, until the surface shone again. It wasn't about the furniture anymore. It was about the principle of care, what she'd given freely, and what she'd finally taken back on her own terms. She unzipped a canvas bag from the shelf and pulled out a cream-colored card. Her handwriting was slow, deliberate, earned, not slapped. She tucked it onto the bassinet pillow, adjusted it until the words sat perfectly centered, and took a single photo. Just the note, the edge of the bassinet, and the light pooling across it. Clean, understated, honest. Then she walked inside, made a cup of tea, and opened her laptop. She hadn't posted anything online in nearly a year, but this morning it felt right. She uploaded the image, captioned it simply, "Some things return to the hands that earned them." No hashtags, no explanation. Just that. She didn't expect anything. She certainly didn't expect what came next. Within an hour, the post had gathered more attention than she'd ever seen. Old colleagues from the hospital, neighbors she hadn't spoken to in years, women from her bridge group. Quiet comments first, respectful, measured, and then dozens of small notes from people who understood more than they said aloud. You did what needed doing. Grace and grit, rare combination. Beautifully put, about time someone stood up to entitlement. Her inbox began to fill. And then one message stopped her cold. It came from Katie Dale, Allison's teenage niece. The same one who'd texted her weeks earlier. Katie, I saw your post. I just wanted to say, you're the only one I trust with my baby one day. Nora stared at the words, her throat tightening. For a long time, she couldn't even type. Finally, she sent back, Nora, then I'll make sure your nursery is perfect. The typing dots appeared, then disappeared, then came back again. Katie, it already would be, because you'd mean it. Nora's vision blurred. She set the laptop aside and pressed her palms to her eyes, not to hide the tears, but to give them privacy. They weren't tears of rage or bitterness. They were something softer, heavier, like release. When she finally looked up, the rain had stopped outside. Sunlight spilled across her kitchen floor, catching on the rim of her mug. She stood and walked to the window. The magnolia tree out front was shedding the last of its blooms, petals drifting across the wet lawn like slow applause. The phone buzzed again. More messages, more hearts, more little bursts of support. Mira had even shared the post, captioning it, "Sometimes boundaries make the most beautiful rooms." Nora smiled, a slow curve that didn't quite fade even as she exhaled. She looked around her house. Quiet, orderly, unburdened. No chaos. No raised voices. Just the hum of her refrigerator and the low murmur of a world finally tilting back into balance. She walked to her desk and slid the photo she'd printed, the bassinet and the note, into the final page of her binder. The story had begun with her name written small in receipts and signatures. Now it ended with her handwriting, steady and final. As she closed the binder, a single thought surfaced, calm, certain, and unshakable. I didn't just take back what I paid for. I took back myself. Outside, the sun pushed through the clouds, warm against the windows, the light pooling like forgiveness across her hands. The bell over the boutique door chimed softly as Nora stepped inside. The familiar scent of powder, cedar, and something faintly floral drifted through the air. It had been months since she'd walked through Trina's baby boutique, yet everything looked the same. Soft lighting, pastel displays, lullabies playing faintly over the speakers. Trina was behind the counter, sorting invoice slips into a drawer. When she looked up and saw Nora, her expression broke into a slow grin. "Well, I'll be," she said, "if it isn't my favorite investor in common sense." Nora smiled. "You always were good with introductions." Trina came around the counter, wiping her hands on a cloth. "You here to gloat or to shop?" "To shop," Nora said. "One last time." Trina tilted her head. "For another nursery?" "For one that actually deserves it." Trina's grin softened into something closer to reverence. "Let me guess. Shelter?" "Women's transitional housing over on Maple," Nora said. "They've got 3 expectant mothers and no cribs that aren't falling apart. I want to change that." Trina pressed her lips together, nodding once. "You want the same set you bought before?" "Yes, all of it. Crib, dresser, rocker, bookshelf, bassinet, the works. You realize that's a small fortune again, right? I do. Trina studied her, then exhaled. I'll ring it up wholesale. Nora's hand brushed over a pale ashwood crib near the display window, the same model that had once sat in Allison's nursery. Its finish gleamed under the light, flawless. There was no bitterness in her anymore, just a steady kind of purpose. As Trina began keying in the order, she said quietly, "You sure you don't want to keep something for yourself? After everything?" Nora shook her head. "No, I've kept enough." When the paperwork was done, Trina pushed the final receipt across the counter. Nora pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse, cream stationery, her neat handwriting already inked across it. "Would you mind slipping this into one of the drawers before delivery?" she asked. Trina unfolded it and read the single line aloud. "Respect is earned. So is peace." A slow, knowing smile crossed her face. Perfect. They arranged the delivery for that afternoon. Nora stayed to help the staff pack the pieces. She wanted to see the boxes sealed, wanted to know exactly how each item left the store. As she worked, she felt an unexpected calm settle in her chest. For the first time since the baby shower, she wasn't taking something back. She was giving something forward. By the time the last box was loaded onto the delivery truck, the late morning sun poured through the front windows, catching in the dust motes that danced between them. Nora stood for a moment watching the truck pull away toward Maple Street, her reflection ghosted in the glass. Trina leaned against the doorway beside her. "You know," she said, "people don't forget this kind of thing, especially around here." "I'm not doing it to be remembered," Nora said. Trina nodded. "That's exactly why you will be." A few hours later, as she sat at home sipping tea, her phone buzzed. It was a social media tag notification. Trina's boutique had posted a photo. The donated nursery set arranged perfectly in the shelter's new room. Pale walls, soft pink blanket folded neatly over the crib rail. Beneath the image was a caption. "A full nursery donation from a woman who believes respect and peace should both be earned. Thank you, Nora Grant." The comments were already pouring in, strangers thanking her, local reporters sharing the story, old co-workers applauding her kindness. But Nora didn't scroll. She just looked once, smiled, and set the phone down beside her cup. Then, almost as an afterthought, she opened her laptop to check her messages. At the top of her inbox was one new notification. "Allison Grant has viewed your post." No message followed, no comment, no apology. Just that silent acknowledgement, digital, distant, but heavy with meaning. Nora sat back in her chair, letting the quiet stretch. Outside, the light had shifted. Long, golden, the kind that softened edges. She whispered to herself, not angry anymore, not even wistful. Some lessons travel better when they're delivered in public. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mira. "Mira, you've officially gone viral. Trina says the shelter's already had 3 more donors call in." Nora typed back, "Good. Let the giving spread farther than the slap did." She closed her laptop, stood, and opened her back door to let in the evening air. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed the hour. For the first time in a long time, Nora felt not victorious, but clean. Still, as the last of the sunlight spilled across her floor, she couldn't help but smile, a quiet, private one meant for no one else, and whisper, "Your move, Allison." The first cold wind of November carried the smell of rain and wood smoke through Nora's open window. She was balancing her checkbook when headlights swept across the living room wall. Seconds later came the hesitant knock. 3 soft taps she recognized instantly. Caleb. She opened the door to find him standing there, hands shoved in the pockets of his jacket, eyes downcast. His hair was longer than usual, his face drawn and tired. For the first time, he looked older than his 34 years, like life had finally stopped giving him room to hide. "Hey, Mom," he said quietly. Nora stepped aside, wordless. He hesitated on the threshold before entering, as though expecting the air to bite him. The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish and coffee. On the sideboard sat the framed copy of Trina's boutique post, the donated nursery photo that had gone everywhere. Caleb's eyes flicked to it, then quickly away. "I saw the story," he said. "Everybody did." "Good," Nora replied evenly. He nodded, fidgeting with his wedding ring. "She's embarrassed. But she's also scared. She keeps saying people stare at her in the grocery store, that they whisper." Nora's voice stayed calm. "Maybe they're whispering advice." He gave a soft, pained laugh. "Mom, please." She gestured toward the couch. "Say what you came to say, Caleb." He sat, elbows on his knees, head bowed. "I should have stopped her," he said finally. "At the shower, at the house, all of it. I just kept thinking if I stayed quiet, it would pass." "It didn't." "I know." He looked up then, his eyes glassy but steady. "You didn't deserve any of it. You were just trying to help us, and she—" His voice cracked, then steadied again. "She went too far. I went too far by not doing anything." Nora crossed her arms. "You didn't even flinch, Caleb. Do you remember that? You stood there while she slapped my hand. You looked at your plate like it was a crime scene." He swallowed hard. "I was trying to keep the peace." "There's no peace in silence," she said. "Only permission." He nodded slowly, shame settling over him like a coat too heavy to remove. "I can't change what I did, but I can fix part of what she owes." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, thicker this time. 5,000. I'll cover it. I know it's not all of it, but it's something." Nora didn't touch it. "That's not yours to pay. It's our debt, Mom. Mine too." "No," she said softly but firmly. "It's her debt. Her lesson. You can't learn it for her." He stared at her, searching for mercy that wasn't there to give. "You're really not going to take it?" "I'm really not." He sat back, defeated, the envelope still in his hand. The ticking clock filled the silence between them. After a long moment, she said, "You always wanted to fix things without breaking a sweat, but some lessons require blisters." He gave a small, hopeless laugh. "You sound like Dad." She looked at him sharply. "No, your father would have handed her the check." That landed. Caleb blinked, the weight of it settling on him. I'll tell her you said no." "Good," Nora said. "Tell her it's the first word that's taught her something." He rose to leave, pausing by the door. "Mom, are we okay?" She met his eyes. "We're honest." "That's better than okay." When the door closed behind him, Nora stood there for a long moment, staring at the space he'd left. Then she picked up her phone and called Mira. "He tried to pay it," Nora said. "Of course he did," Mira replied. "Guilt has a wallet." "I told him no." "Good." Mira's voice softened. "You ready for me to update the lien paperwork? Interest starts in 30 days. "Yes," Nora said. "Let's keep it clean." "Always do." After they hung up, Nora walked to her desk. Her estate binder lay open to the last page, beneficiaries. Her pen hovered above the line where Caleb's name sat neatly printed. For a moment, her chest tightened with memory. Scraped knees, first dances, the smell of baby shampoo. Then she drew one precise line through his name. Below it, she wrote in calm, even script, "To be directed to charitable donation, Women's Shelters of Hamilton County." When she set down the pen, the room felt heavier and lighter at once. Outside, the rain had returned. Not violent, just steady, insistent, like the world rinsing itself clean. She closed the binder and whispered, "Some debts aren't paid in money." In the reflection of the window, she caught her own faint smile, not cruel, but certain. The envelope Caleb had tried to give her still sat on the coffee table, unopened. She left it there when she turned off the light, letting it rest under the quiet hum of the house. Some lessons didn't need an audience. The first snow hadn't stuck yet, but the morning air was brittle enough to carry its promise. Nora parked outside the Maple Street Women's Shelter, her breath fogging against the windshield. The building was small, pale brick, a row of narrow windows, a wreath made of paper hearts hanging crookedly on the front door. Inside, warmth greeted her. Coffee brewing somewhere, children's laughter echoing down a hallway. A volunteer in a soft blue sweatshirt smiled from the front desk. "Mrs. Grant, they've been expecting you." Nora nodded and followed the woman through a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of baby lotion and disinfectant. She could hear a soft hum of a lullaby before she even entered the nursery. And then she saw it. Her nursery. The same pale ashwood crib, the same dresser, the same glider she had chosen with such care months ago. Only now, it didn't feel like restitution. It felt like restoration. The walls were painted a warm cream. Sunlight filtered through sheer curtains. The room breathed, alive with purpose. A young woman sat near the window, her baby asleep against her chest. She looked up when Nora entered, startled, then smiled shyly. "You're her?" she asked softly. Nora blinked. "Her? The one who donated all this?" the woman said. "Trina told me your name. I'm Lena." She nodded down at the tiny bundle in her arms. "This is Grace." Nora smiled. "Beautiful name." Lena stood, motioning toward the glider. "Want to hold her? She just went down, but she's good with strangers, especially calm ones." Nora hesitated for only a heartbeat before sitting. Lena placed the baby carefully in her arms. Grace's warmth soaked into her chest like sunlight breaking through winter. The baby stirred, one small hand curling around the fabric of Nora's sleeve. Her breath was soft and rhythmic, the fragile, perfect sound of life unaware of the noise that made it possible. Nora began to rock, slowly, gently. The glider's familiar creak filled the quiet. She looked around the room again, eyes tracing the furniture's soft edges. The crib's smooth finish, the dresser's faint scent of new wood. Every item that had once sat in a home where gratitude had been replaced by arrogance now stood in a space where appreciation hung thick as air. Lena sank into the chair across from her. "I didn't think people like you existed anymore," she said. "People like me? Ones who give without strings." Nora smiled faintly. "Oh, there were strings. I just cut them myself." Lena laughed quietly, the sound warm and fragile. "Well, thank you for this. I didn't have anything ready before Grace came. Now, it feels like we can breathe." Nora looked down at the sleeping baby. Her chest tightened, not with sorrow this time, but release. For the first time since that slap across her hand, her lungs filled without weight. "You've done something good here," Lena said, almost as if she could read her thoughts. Nora brushed her thumb along Grace's tiny palm. "No," she whispered, "you're the one doing good. I'm just returning balance." When she finally handed the baby back, Lena hugged her. Brief, but sincere. Nora wasn't much for hugging, but she let it happen. There was something clean about it, something unburdened. Before leaving, she lingered by the glider, running her fingertips along the armrest. "She'll rock better for you," Nora said softly. "Furniture remembers kindness." Outside, snow had begun to fall, light, uncertain flakes drifting like ash. She stood for a moment on the sidewalk, face tilted up toward the gray sky, then started her car. An hour later, she stopped by Trina's boutique. The bell chimed, familiar and warm. Trina spotted her immediately and waved her over to the back wall. where a new display had been hung, framed photos of donors who'd supported the shelter project. In the center, under soft lighting, was Nora's photo, her hand resting on the ashwood crib, eyes calm but unyielding. Below it, a small plaque read, "Nora Grant, for reminding us that giving back doesn't mean staying silent." Trina came to stand beside her, arms crossed, pride written plain across her face. "You were right," she said quietly. "You don't owe silence." Nora looked at the photo again. "No," she said. "I owe peace." And I finally picked it up. They stood there together, watching the snow through the boutique window. Trina squeezed her shoulder. "What now?" Nora smiled, a calm, knowing curve of her mouth. "Now," she said, "I see what life gives back when you stop asking for permission." As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed once in her coat pocket. She didn't check it until she was outside, the cold air crisp against her face. Unknown number. "She's here. The baby's coming early." Nora stared at the message. No signature. But she didn't need one. The snow thickened, falling steady as breath. She whispered to herself, "So it begins again." Snow dusted the world in quiet silver by the time Nora came home that night. The streetlights glowed like lanterns against the steady flurry, the kind of stillness that made sound itself seem softer. She hung her coat by the door, toes tingling as warmth crept back through her shoes. On the kitchen counter, the binder waited, thick, worn, and finished. The pages inside held every detail of her reckoning. Receipts, statements, copies of judgments, photographs, and that last line of her own handwriting, "Not yours anymore." Nora rested her hand on its cover for a long moment. Then, with a slow exhale, she slipped it into the bottom drawer of her sideboard, beneath neatly folded dish towels. It wasn't hidden, just laid to rest. Mission complete. The phone buzzed once on the counter. A text from Katie Dale lit the screen. "Katie. Mom says the baby's here. A girl. I thought you'd want to know." Katie. Again. "Also, can I come stay a few days? I need a break from the noise." Nora typed back. "Of course, sweetheart. Bring your sketch pad." When the knock came the next afternoon, Nora already had soup simmering on the stove. Katie stepped inside, cheeks flushed pink from the cold, bundled in a wool coat and carrying her worn art satchel. She looked older than her 16 years, sharp-eyed but gentle, like someone who'd already seen how cruelty could hide behind a polite smile. "Smells amazing," Katie said, pulling off her gloves. "Tomato bisque," Nora replied, "the cure for everything except foolishness." They laughed. The easy kind of laughter that filled empty rooms without effort. The week stretched itself out gently after that. They painted ornaments, played cards, and stayed up late watching old black-and-white movies Nora kept on DVD. On the third night, snow blanketed Chattanooga thick enough to quiet the streets. The house glowed with lamplight, and for once, there was no past to compete with the present. Katie sat cross-legged on the living room rug, sketching while Nora poured tea. "I drew your porch," she said shyly, turning the page. The pencil lines were clean, careful. The sunflowers in the vase, the steady symmetry of the steps, even the curve of Nora's rocking chair. "It's beautiful," Nora said. "You have an eye for truth." Katie smiled. "You mean details?" "No, truth," Nora said, setting her cup down. "Details are for people afraid to say what they see." They ate simple dinners, grilled cheese, soup, toast. Laughter came easier each night, the way it used to when Nora had her own little boy sitting at the table, hair sticking up in every direction. On Friday morning, Katie wandered into the spare room, the one Nora had quietly kept as her sanctuary. The furniture was minimal, a reading chair, a soft lamp, and against the far wall, a small bassinet draped in linen. Katie ran her fingers over the curved wood. You still kept one? She asked. Nora stood in the doorway, hands wrapped around her tea mug. Her expression was soft, but steady. I did. Katie turned. For her baby? Nora shook her head. No. For mine. Katie blinked, confused. Nora stepped closer, setting the mug down beside the bassinet. For the part of me I almost gave away. The part that built, believed, and never asked to be thanked. I keep it to remind myself that giving is strength, not surrender. Katie's throat worked silently for a moment before she said, You're kind of amazing, Grandma. Nora chuckled. Kind of? They both laughed again, light and real. Later that night, after Katie had gone to bed, Nora stood by the window watching the snow still fall. The sky hung low, thick with quiet. Somewhere across town, a newborn girl she might never meet was taking her first breath. And somehow, that felt right. Endings and beginnings overlapping, neither needing the other's permission. Nora turned off the lights, leaving only the glow of a single lamp near the bassinet. She ran her fingers along its edge, the wood smooth and warm beneath her touch. For the first time, she whispered the story out loud, start to finish, just to the still room and the snow pressing soft against the windows. At the baby shower, she slapped my hand, said, Don't touch what isn't yours. Her reflection in the window looked back, older, quieter, undefeated. So, she said softly, I took back what I'd paid for. The lamp flickered once, catching the gold glint of her wedding band. Outside, the snow thickened, white upon white, erasing every sharp edge in sight. Nora smiled. Then she turned off the light, leaving the house in peace at last.